Hello, welcome back. Today we're talking about amortization, what it is and kind of how we use it. So our goal is then, of course, to be able to understand what the meaning of it is and also be able to calculate what's called an amortization schedule. Let's take a look at that. So amortization, as it says, is the process of paying off a debt. And it's a specified length of time of making approximately, and we'll swing by approximately here a little bit later, equal periodic payments that include compound interest. So good examples are car loans and home loans. So basically, if you've seen the video on present value of an annuity, it's basically how this works. So you have some amount you're going to purchase a car for or a house for right now, then you have to pay that off. And basically, this amortization essentially is the kind of how that works. Where basically each payment, you're paying off not only the balance or how much of the, for example, let's say you buy a car for $50,000. So let's say you pay it off for 60 months, so for 5 years. So each one of those monthly payments you make is you're paying off partly the balance of the car, the $50,000 of the car, but also the interest. Okay, depending on what the interest rate is, also the interest. That's, of course, the interest is how the bank makes money to give you the loan. And so, and what you will see actually with this example is that you're paying more interest early on than you are later on in the process. That amortization, just that process of paying off a debt in a, once again, over a specified length of time and making certainly, or making periodic payments. Okay, and they could be monthly, but could be other periods as well. Now, the main thing I want to do today is talk about how to create an amortization schedule. And so this, as it says, is a complete record of the amortization payments of your either monthly payments or whatever the periodic payment is. For each payment, the schedule records the amount of interest paid in each payment, the unpaid balance reduction, and the unpaid balance. And we're going to go through each one of those, explain what it is, and also how we calculate those. We'll do this in Excel in a spreadsheet. So the first thing we do is, we're familiar, if you've seen the video on the present value of an annuity, is basically determine the payment. And so that's going to be using that same formula, basically solve for the payment itself, where our present value is going to be the amount of the loan, and then I will be the interest rate, the periodic interest rate, and then N will be the number of total periods, number of total payments. That's the first thing we're going to do. In fact, we'll go and do that for our example. And I realized I'd not typed out the example I was going to use. So let me do that really quickly. So just as a moment, be patient as I do this. So we're going to construct an amortization schedule for a $10,000 loan, or I'll call it a debt, that is be paid in 6 equal quarterly payments at 2.6% interest per quarter. Okay. Now, let's figure out what we have. So first off, we're going to construct this an amortization schedule. The first thing we're going to do then is want to find the monthly payment. Okay, so let's collect what we have. So our present value, our debt, is $10,000. Okay, now, what's also a bit different about this is that our I, of course, is our interest rate per period. And this time, our interest rate is actually given, it can be quarterly payments, so it'd be 4 times a year, but actually interest rate is given 2.6 interest per quarter. So actually that's going to be as a decimal, 0.026 divided by 1 for the interest period. And actually they're the same in this case. So it's just going to be 0.026. Once again, interest is given per quarter. That was given per year or annually, then you have to divide that by 4, because that's the number of doing it quarterly. But at the same time, since they're given on the same scale, it's just the same value. And then finally, our N is we're going to be making quarterly payments on the same amount as our interest. We just have N is going to be 6 payments. N is equal to 6. So let's solve this. And so the payment, PMT, is equal to 10,000, and then times I, which is 0.026, divided by 1 minus 1 plus I, that's going to be 1.026, raised to the negative 6. Okay, now we're going to use Desmos for this. And I'm just going to open a new Desmos window. And what we have is going to be 10,000. And then the interest was going to be 0.026 divided by 1 minus 1.026 raised to the negative 6. Okay, so our payment then is going to be $1,821.58, around the nearest cent. 1721.58. Equal to $1,821.58. Okay, so that's the first part. That's the payment. Now, what we're going to do then for the schedule is that's the amount we're going to pay each month. As we'll see, you may possibly have to adjust the very last payment to make the balance come out correctly. But then what we do next then is we'll determine the amount of interest paid by the current payment. So this amount right here, you're paying off partly not only the balance, part of the balance of the $10,000, but also part of the interest generated. So that's what we're going to determine, is how much interest of this $1,821.58, how much of that is interest. Once we know the interest, then we'll know from that we can find how much then of this payment goes toward paying off the balance, and then we'll subtract that from the balance to find what's called the unpaid balance. Okay, so the interest paid for payment is going to be I, the interest rate, 0.026 times the unpaid balance. That will tell us then the how much that each month is going to change. That's going to change each month because as the unpaid balance goes lower and lower, then the amount, that fraction, the I times the unpaid balance will be a smaller amount, and that's going to be a smaller fraction of this payment. Then we're going to find then what's left of this is the amount that's actually going to pay off the balance. And then finally, our last step then is going to be subtract what's paid off that month from what the unpaid balance so far. And then that will give us the unpaid balance. Okay, so the unpaid balance reduction is the payment minus the amount that's interest. And then the unpaid balance remaining is going to be the previous unpaid balance minus that unpaid balance reduction from the payment. And then finally, as it says, repeat these steps until we're done paying off until the unpaid balance is 0. And it's possible we have to adjust the final payment to make sure it is actually the unpaid balance is 0 at the end of the 6 payments. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Microsoft Excel. To create the amortization schedule. Let's call it the schedule. Okay, and this kind of gives us a better idea of how this works instead of just talking about it. Let's take a look what we have. All right, I've already constructed part of it, and I also will include this in the material for this video. All right, so once again, we have 6 payments, and the payment says $1,821.58. Now, also my original unpaid balance, that's the amount of actually the loan is for, is $10,000. So I'm calling that payment number 0. That's where we're starting. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click on the corner of that, and I can drag that amount down. Each one of the payments is each one of the monthly payments is going to be the same amount, except possibly the last one. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is determine how much of this payment goes toward paying off the interest. So in this box, put equal sign to make a calculation. I'm going to do the interest rate, which is 0.026. I, 0.026 times this cell, okay, which contains the unpaid balance, and hit enter. So what that tells me, out of this payment amount for the first month, $260 of that is paying off the interest. Okay. Now, the rest of that payment then goes to pay off the balance. So how I find that is just do equals again. So this amount, the amount of the monthly payment, minus the amount of the interest for that month. Okay, that tells me about $1,500, almost $1,600 is going off to pay off the balance. So then my final step for this month, or this month, these are not monthly payments, but for this payment period is to find how much, what's the unpaid balance that's left. So what I do there is do the unpaid balance, this cell, minus the amount, the reduction amount, and that tells me that after this month, I have about $8,400 left to pay off. So when I do that is for each one of these payment periods. So now the nice thing about Excel is I can just drag that down for the next one. We'll see that. So if I drag that down, this is 219. Let's make sure that matches up. So this should be 0.026, our interest rate per payment period, times, in this case, E3, the unpaid balance. That's what that is. You notice that's less than it was before because the unpaid balance is less than it was before. So as we'll see, a pattern we'll see is every time the amount of interest from each payment is going to drop, and the amount we're actually paying off the balance will increase for each payment until we finally pay it off. Okay, once again, so what I do here is I go back here and drag this down again. Okay, so once again, the amount, since the amount of interest is less, the amount I'm using to pay off, the amount of this payment that goes and actually paying off the balance is more. And then so finally drag this down as well. And that gives me now the unpaid balance that's left after the second payment. And to double check, make sure all these are correct. So this should be, you're right, cell B4 minus C4. And then this cell should be, as it says, E3, right, that unpaid balance minus this amount. Now we can do that drag down step for each one of these steps. Let's go ahead and fill in everything. And honestly, I'm not sure if there's a way to do this all at once. There may be, but I'm not sure how to do it. So we'll just do it one at a time. And you kind of see everything unfolds. Then for month 4, oops, sorry about that. Let me undo that. Okay, where's the, sorry about that. Where's the undo button? Okay. Now, let's try that again. So make sure you get the corner, drag that down. All right, give me a moment. What is going on? I'm sorry. Hang on. Just be patient with me here. This is, where's the, oh, there it is. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay, let's try that again. All right, so take the corner, drag this down. Okay, so that's the amount of interest for month 4. Now, from the corner, drag this down. That's the amount of the unpaid balance reduction, how much of that payment actually goes to paying off the balance. And then if I drag this one down, and that tells me then how much the balance is left after the 4th payment. So I have 2 more payments. Let's repeat that process again. I drag that down again. As you see, that's the interest is being reduced each month, each payment, because it's the interest is being generated based on the unpaid balance, which reduces, which is less every month. Again, so to find out then the amount of the monthly payment goes toward paying off the balance is increased. Then after payment 5, my unpaid balance is that. And then finally, let's do this one more time. Now, you notice, yeah, so this is off by about 2 cents. So what happened is that since in calculating interest and different things, rounding off the nearest cent, sometimes it's not exactly right. So what we have to do then, this is why I said you're making approximately equal payments every month. This payment's going to be slightly different. So it's minus 2 cents. We should be able to add 2 cents here, I believe. 60. Oops, no, went the wrong way. So I should have reduced that by 2 cents. So 0.56. There we go. Because what we want is after the final payment, the unpaid balance to be exactly 0. And that's what we have. So as I said, we're making approximately equal payments every month, and we have to adjust the last payment to make sure the unpaid balance is ended there. A few more things we can do and actually do totals now. of everything. So we can find the total paid. So here we're just going to use sum. So type in SUM, double click on that, and then highlight the values we want to sum. Close the parentheses and hit equal. Oops. Okay, so that tells you right there. Remember, the original loan was $10,000. We paid about $929.46 in interest. And so we do the sum over here. It should be approximately that within maybe a few cents. Once again, hit SUM, double click on the sum, then highlight the values you want to sum, close your parentheses, then hit enter. Right, $929.49. That's the amount of interest we paid on that loan at that interest rate. Of course, your interest rate is higher, there'd be more. Interest rate is less, that would be less. Now we can also do the total of the unpaid balance reduction, then should be equal to our total unpaid balance to begin with. Let's do the sum of this, except for maybe a few cents. So click here, drag all these down, close the parentheses and enter. Right, so that's what it should be. So this shows this is our completed amortization schedule for this payment. Okay, so we have 6 payments. The monthly payment is the same except for the very last one, just by a few cents. And that tells the total amount we paid over those 6 payments. This tells the total interest we paid over those 6 payments. And once again, the fraction of the payment dedicated to interest has gone down each month. Then the fraction of the payment dedicated to actually paying off the balance has gone up each month. And then at the end of the last payment, our unpaid balance should be 0. And then if you total, that should total up the balance we paid. Now, what's interesting, this is a smaller payment in terms of number of monthly payments, but in like a car payment or especially a house payment, in many cases, your first few payments, maybe first several payments, may actually be almost entirely interest, mostly paying off interest. And then finally, as you get closer to the end, then each payment is more and more paying off as part of the balance until you get to the final result of a 0 unpaid balance. So what we've seen so far then is how to calculate an amortization schedule. So first find your monthly payment using the present value annuity formula. Then basically do this method here as we just showed to find your amortization schedule. Thank you. Have a good day.